Hi everyone, how are we all doing? Today we're going back to Ghost of Tsushima and talking about Ryuzo, the Lost Warrior. When we first meet Ryuzo, he's hunting in the forest on behalf of his men, claiming that they're starving and they'll be lucky to survive a week, as they are now. His men being the Straw Hat mercenary band. For this reason, despite being friends with Jin and knowing him seemingly well, he refuses to commit to Sakai's cause. Though Jin did just help him fend off some Mongols, and the two opt to discuss the matter at the Straw Hat camp. On the way, they meet a survivor robbed of his rice and horse, where they learn that the Mongols are taking food to Fort Ohira and maybe hoarding it there. At the Straw Hat camp, Jin tells the men about the fort in a misguided attempt to give them hope. But Ryu discusses with him that not only is that his job, but that Jin has no place doing that. At least showing us that there's quite a strong relationship between Ryu and his men, and also that he doesn't have any sort of tyrannical relationship with his men. Like, his men aren't there by force, they're choosing to be there and can leave if they so choose. Giving Jin a spare straw hat and some robes, we next meet him with Ryuzo as his men are finishing up their scouting of the fort. Only those either not sick or too hungry join him, and after attacking the fort they find no food, but a document in Chinese explaining that the Mongols are taking the food offshore. Ryuzo first shows some hesitation before Jin explains that he can make out some of the text if it's in Chinese. This was going to be a little bit relevant later, but Ryu then orders his men to create distraction for him and Jin whilst they steal a boat. Once that's done, they retreat into the forest. And this shows us a great deal of trust that Ryu has for his men and his abilities. We later find out that they were together for 3 years, but here we get a better sense of how strong their relationship is. Everything goes to plan on the boat, and they do find food, except the Mongols burn the boat, and Jin finds battle plans, which he exchanges with Ryu for his help at Castle Canada. Whilst Jin does want some sort of assurance that he'll get his friend's aid, he also doesn't want his friend getting himself killed. So he does truly care about his friend's well-being at this point. After that, Ryu finds us explaining that his best men have been taken captive. Without missing a beat, he also tells us that without them, Jin's uncle will stay in Mongol care, and Jin's on board to help. On the ride there, Ryu explains the importance of their duel during the tournament, that he called several lords to watch in the hopes that he might be recruited into their service and eventually become samurai. Jin beats him so badly in front of these men that his hopes are dashed, and when Jin retorts, asking Ryu why he never spoke to him about this, Ryu explains that it was a matter of pride and honor, like accepting pity. What would his reputation be like? What would he think of himself? Instead, he rode with the Straw Hats, and they become his family. And this allows him to retain some degree of self-worth and importance, pride. That said, Ryu harbors no ill will towards Jin. He takes it like a man. He's not complaining about it necessarily. He's not really making excuses. He's accepted the past and leaves it at that. When they meet up with Ryu's remaining able fighters, 2 of them desert. Ryu begins to rage, but Jin's there to temper his emotions and keep him on track. Ryu also relies on Jin to have a plan for his men, showing not just how desperate he is, but also that to some degree, as he is now, he does need Jin. Jin, of course, does have a plan. It works. They find the Straw Hats safe and fed once all the fighting is over. Ryu questions the Mongols' motives, to which Jin responds,
"Maybe they expected something in return."
Which is a nice foreshadowing moment. When the time comes for Ryu to repay his debt, he doesn't show for the attack on Canada. He instead joins the enemy. In his defense, the Mongols have proven how significant of a force they are, and any sort of direct attack would be suicide, regardless of how many numbers the Straw Hats would add. When we look at this from Ryu's perspective, he's had to deal with desertions, losses due to illness, the overwhelming nature of everything that's going on, stresses of leadership, and can you really blame Ryu for taking the easy route? The only things that matter to him are his men, and the Mongols represent a definite end to his men, to the Straw Hats, the people that took him in when he had nowhere else to go. So when Jin confronts him and offers him redemption for turning against his country, friend, Ryu needs something to convince him that joining Jin won't doom his men. Jin then appeals to any lingering desire of Ryu to become samurai, but Ryu has already put those hopes behind him and only sees that promotion as a definite death ticket for his men. Too much has changed and Jin doesn't understand his friend. but there's still no killing intent. Jin still wants to save his friend, and even after their duel, offers him one last chance to join him. 2 days later, Koton arrives at Shimura Castle and has some islanders tied to pyres. The castle gates won't open after the Khan's request to enter, so he hands a torch to Ryu. You can visibly see that Ryu is broken from his decision. This clashes with his morality, and even for his men, he can hardly believe what he's done.
Open the gate! Open the gate!
Once the gates open, he falls to his knees, literally being unable to stand with the weight of what he's done. A visual representation of how this character cannot be redeemed. And somewhere inside, he knows it. The next meeting with Jin, his crimes against his country and people are beyond forgiveness. Where Jin misunderstood him and couldn't convince him to join his cause, Ryu misunderstands Jin and cannot sway him, accomplishing the opposite actually. When Jin tells him to surrender and answer for his crimes, Ryu cannot face them, feeling that he's in too deep to turn back now. We know that Ryu can't defeat Sakai in a fair 1v1 duel, and all Jin can do for him now is give him an honorable end. Jin executes his former friend with his tanto, and though he couldn't give Ryu samurai status in life, he gives him the same end that a disgraced samurai would choose in an attempt to retain or restore his lost honor, which is beautiful as Jin reaches the height of his conflict between his time as the ghost and as a samurai. This is important as it not just communicates to us that whilst Jin is choosing a darker path, he still has certain moral things in place and ultimately is of the side of good. But also in the samurai code, death for an unworthy cause was a dog's death. In his desperate state, who knows what dishonorable acts Ryuzo might commit? Whilst he can never truly be samurai, at least he doesn't have to die in dishonor.